Today, I'm going to talk about my top 5 African cichlids that you can keep in a 29-gallon aquarium. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo from Tazawa Tanks. Now I get a lot of questions when it comes to African cichlids because I do keep so many. I keep, Mbuna, dwarf Mbuna, Tanganyikan fish, Malawi fish, peacocks, etc. So I keep a lot of African cichlids. And I get questions all the time about what tank size they should be in, probably because I made some videos talking about tank size and African cichlids and medium-sized tanks, and people always reach out to me and want to know what they can keep in a 29 or 40 or 55, etc. So I'm going to make some videos talking about this very specific subject, and today I'm going to start with 29 gallons. Now, one of the reasons why I like a 29 gallon is it's kind of like the start of like a little bit bigger of a tank. It's as long as a 20 long, it's 30 inches long, taller, and does kind of make it look kind of like a larger aquarium. And it does have a pretty good footprint, some pretty good surface area, so you can start to keep some African cichlids in a 29-gallon aquarium. Now, before you start commenting down below and telling me that you cannot keep African cichlids in this 29-gallon tank, you have to watch the video and see what I'm talking about. Secondly, I also want to mention that just because you've put Mbuna and peacocks and other stuff in a 29-gallon doesn't mean it's ideal. It just might be where in your very specific situation it's working for you because you have a breeding colony or something, but it wouldn't really work for the masses. So I am going to kind of generalize, and this is more for people to kind of use as a guideline to understand the necessities of certain fish and the size of tank that they should be in. So number 5 is going to be Brak, and this is a very beautiful African cichlid from Lake Tanganyika, and it kind of might be called, there's a few different names, there's some common names like fairy cichlids, etc., but they have these really beautiful finnage, long kind of almost like lyre tails on their rear fin, and they are very, very fun to watch. They're fun to watch spawn, they are fun to see them raise up their fry, and they can be kept in a 29-gallon. Now, if you are going to keep Brak in a 29-gallon, you do want to make sure that you do have lots of hiding places because they can be quite aggressive, especially the dominant male. So I would recommend having like lots of rockwork stacked up so that some of them can hide in different areas and not get beat up. I would say maybe start off like with around 4 or 5 or so in a 29 and provide lots of places for them to hide, and hopefully you'll have some spawn, and then you'll end up with some fry, and from there you'll have to sell some, give some away, rehome some, but you can kind of have a nice kind of small colony in a 29-gallon tank. The number 4 African cichlid that I would recommend for a 29-gallon aquarium is going to be Nile lulupi. And I hope I'm saying that correctly, but anyway, they are a very beautiful Tanganyikan fish. They get to be 3 to 4 inches long tops. Either they kind of range from like a really bright yellow to kind of like a very rich yellowish orange to almost like a brown. And they're like a crevice / rock dweller, a kind of a recessed crack dweller, I could say. So they like to have lots of rock work and lots of little places they can kind of get their body in, and they would also be a very good African cichlid to keep in a 29-gallon aquarium. Number 3 on my list is going to be Kribensis. Now people might say, wait a minute, Kribensis African cichlid? Well, technically, yes, they are from the continent of Africa. They are just a West African cichlid, so they're not from the Rift Lakes of East Africa, but more from the western region of the continent of Africa, northern western region, where they encounter different water parameters. So this would be a tank where you're not going to want to have the same water parameters that you would have for your East African fish, but more a little bit softer, etc. So anyway, Kribensis are really, really beautiful. They display some really amazing colors. Sometimes a female kind of displays this kind of pink on her body, and they also will pair up and spawn like in little tiny caves. So if you can get like one of those little huts that made out of either like a coconut husk, or it could be made out of like clay, as an example, like a clay pot, or one of those fake rocks, they will spawn in those caves and they will pair up, and they can be really, really really beautiful and would do well in a 29-gallon aquarium. You could have plants in that aquarium. They won't be too harsh on the plants. I have heard that some people say they eat plants, but if you have some hardier plants, they would do very well with those. Number 2 on my list, and this is one of my favorite fish that I keep, and that's Juliochromis. Now, there are a lot of different types of Julies. This is a Tanganyika cichlid as well, and they come in all different color patterns, but they are a very, very interesting fish. They have a very unique shape, similar to the Lalupi from a couple fish ago. Kind of a longer cylindrical body, different colorations, bands of yellow and black and white and maybe a little bit of blue iridescent in them, and they also will pair up and spawn. They're really a very fun fish to watch, to keep, and they also would do well in a 29-gallon aquarium. That's what I keep mine in, actually. They also do like to have rock work, so a lot of these fish that I've been suggesting, they do well with like rocks and crevices. They would also do well. So if you are going to keep Julies, having lots of rocks and hiding places and rocks with like gaps and cracks and stuff like that to where they can kind of get in, some of the smaller fry can go in there and hide between the rocks, they would do very well in there. Now, there will be some aggression, and with cichlids that does happen. It is kind of common, but again, if you have lots of rock work, if you can provide hides for them, they will do well. The number 1 African cichlid for a 29-gallon aquarium is one of my favorite fish, and I have 5 aquariums with these fish in them currently, and those are shell dwellers. Now, there are different types of shell dwellers, and I'm not going to go through all of them. You would have, for example, gold ocellatus, you could have brevis, you could have similis, you could have multifasciatus, which is one of the ones that I keep along with the gold ocellatus. So there are lots of different African cichlid shell-dwelling fish, and they range in size from as tiny as like 1.5 inches or so to maybe 2.5 3 inches tops, and they are really, really beautiful to watch. Their behavior, their patterns, tons of fun. I would say for a 29-gallon aquarium, you could pretty much keep any of those that I suggested, although there are some other shell dwellers where there's a very dimorphic range where the males are giant and the females are tiny, and in those situations you might not want to get that type of species for a 29-gallon aquarium. But all of the ones that I mentioned, the ocellatus, the brevis, etc., the similis, the neos, they would all do well in a 29-gallon aquarium. A couple things that you do want to make sure you have is you want to make sure that you have lots of shells, and the reason why you have shells is because the fish will actually swim into the shells and use them to hide. They will also use them to spawn and raise up their fry in these empty snail shells. You can get like escargot shells, the extra large escargot shells, like on Amazon or anywhere like that, and they do very well spawning in those, living in those, and you can have an entire colony. In a 29-gallon aquarium, I would just cover the entire bottom of the tank with shells and probably put some rocks in there. The reason why I would have some rocks, especially with some of the fish like the gold ocellatus as an example, which can be a little bit more aggressive, is if you have a couple of large rocks like in the middle of the 29-gallon tank, kind of breaking up the tank into different sections, that way you'll kind of break up the aggression, because one fish that's on this side of the tank wouldn't see this one on this side of the tank because there's a big rock in the middle. So this one can kind of control their little colony or harem over here, and this one might control their little colony or harem over there. So otherwise, having like a sandy substrate or a aragonite, like a finer aragonite or something, is very good because they like to dig and they'll bury their shells. They're little builder fish, but really, really fun. They do well in a 29-gallon tank, and they are one of my favorite fish. If you have a favorite African cichlid that you've kept in a 29-gallon tank and it wasn't on this list, I would love to read down below what you're keeping in a 29. I'm sure I probably missed some. Those are kind of my top 5. Maybe you have 5 more different African cichlids that you would keep in a 29-gallon tank. Now again, we're not saying that you can't keep, you know, dwarf mbuna or a yellow lab or something like that in a 29, because I know many of you have done that. I've done it. I've had African cichlids. I've had peacocks in 20-gallon tanks for, you know, months at a time, when I had like a male and like 3 females doing some breeding and stuff like that. So I understand that it can be done, but again, we're talking to kind of general, you know, to the general audience out there to help them understand what African cichlids they can keep in 29. But anyway, comment down below what you've done, and let me know your thoughts on my list. Do you think I'm way off? Do you like the list? Would you change anything? Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.